A very good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and all the attendees to this webinar this afternoon, How to Build Wealth in Mauritius. And I'd like to welcome everybody who's already online. We've got almost 200 people. About 800 people or so have registered for this webinar this afternoon, which is quite phenomenal for a webinar of this sort. It shows the interest in the tiny island nation country, and the interest shown from South Africans in particular is quite phenomenal. So I hope you learn a lot this afternoon. I'd like to introduce you to the panel. Myself, Magnus Heystek, who's the chairman of the Brenthurst Group, also the chairman of the Brent Consulta management company in Mauritius. We have Samina Jagoo-Jaffery, who's the CEO of Brent Consulta. And then lastly, we have Richard Haller, who's very well known in the property marketing business. He's a director of Pam Golding Mauritius. We're going to be talking about how Mauritius has developed over the last 10 to 15 years from a relatively sleepy island nation state where people go to have a honeymoon and spend a week or two on the beach to a very progressive, very modern business center, global business center, where many South Africans have set up base. They've retired here, they've built properties, they've bought properties, and with other kinds of permits, they can come and work on the island and establish businesses on the island. And that is fueling the growth in Mauritius, or of Mauritius, to a very, very large extent. And I saw earlier this week that according to the New World Wealth report, that Mauritius is one of the countries that has the fastest growing sector of so-called millionaires, high net worth individuals who have moved to the island. So there's been a growth of about 69% in this category of people, many from South Africa, many from Africa, and then of course France and the United Kingdom and elsewhere. Whereas South Africa, according to the same report, has lost about 22,000 high net worth individuals, or let's call them dollar millionaires for that matter, which is very worrying because South Africa is currently exporting a lot of its wealthy people for various reasons. But people are now starting to look at Mauritius not only as a place where you go and retire as a millionaire, but also to start your business or start your career and set up business structures which are globally orientated, which can cover the whole of the world, not only South Africa. So that has changed dramatically post-COVID, where people realize they can work from Mauritius and service their clients anywhere in the world. And I'm sitting in Mauritius, but I'm dealing with people all over around the world, London, Australia, South Africa, Cape Town. So it makes absolutely no difference. So I will start my presentation. Just why are we considering setting up structures to build your wealth in Mauritius? Well, the simple answer is that South Africa, over the last 10 to 15 years, but let's focus on the last 10 years, has not been a great place to create wealth. In fact, if you analyze and dissect the numbers very, very carefully, and I'm referring to the categories of assets that we use to build wealth, i.e. property, the stock market, and the currency, has actually been cataclysmic for many South Africans that become very, very poor unless they haven't taken steps to protect themselves. And I don't think it's fully appreciated how bad the last 10 years has been as far as the average South African is concerned. So let's have a look at, I have a problem with the slides. Let's see if we can reach. My apologies, there's a delay in the slides. I'm waiting for someone to come and assist me, but I'm going to continue talking. I know what the facts are. Until we sort out my slides, we'll have to just use the power of imagination. First of all, let's start with property market in South Africa, the residential and the listed property market in South Africa. It hasn't been a great period of time, and in my report, I talk and I refer to research by the Visual Capitalist, which is a fantastic resource, which shows in the last 12 years, last 10 years, more than 80% of the modern world or the Western world where they measure property prices has had a real growth in the value of property. I'm talking about residential property. The most active markets, United States, up almost 80% in real terms. But remember, this is in dollar terms. And the countries like New Zealand, Australia, even Iceland, Norway, Denmark, they all had similar increases in value. So over the last 10 years, if you had invested and taken your money offshore 10 years ago and bought property in any of those countries, and to a lesser extent in Mauritius, but I'll come back to that in a second, has been a very good investment. You built dollar-based assets at a time when the South African asset has been declining very sharply in dollar terms. And South Africa is one of very few countries who, during the same period of time, did not have real growth in their value of their properties. And when you strip out inflation and you strip out the one sector that did well, the Western Cape, and one of my slides shows it, but if you take out Western Cape, the situation or the story is equally bad or even worse for those people who own residential property outside of the Western Cape. They have, in fact, suffered losses between 15 and 20% in real terms, ladies and gentlemen. And I can assure you that is very damaging to any person's personal balance sheet when, not only in rand terms, but also in dollar terms, the value of one of your biggest assets is declining very, very sharply. In fact, over the last 10 years, your average property price in South Africa has actually declined by about 50% in dollar terms. And while dollars, it doesn't make such an impact in the short term or the long term, that is a major, major factor. Certain areas of the market, and Richard can talk about it a little bit later, is that the property market is almost, to a certain extent, come to a standstill. There's just no trades, smaller towns, larger towns. They've stopped collecting information because there's simply nobody who is buying or selling. And I've seen that personally. I've written about it many, many times, that there's just no trades. And I always joke when Pam Golding moves out of a town and Finbond or any other loan company moves into that particular town, it's the end of the property market, which unfortunately is true. Now, this, in my view, is underreported. It's not, people have stopped writing about it, but even in larger cities like Pretoria, like Johannesburg, Durban, Pietermaritzburg, Kimberley, Bloemfontein, the property market has, by and large, almost come to a screeching halt, and deals that are done take extremely long. People are accepting offers much, much lower than the market value, whatever it might be. And it is affecting, in many cases, things like their retirement planning or plans to immigrate. The exception, as I mentioned, is, of course, the Western Cape, which has done exceedingly well. And we all know from experience and the talk around the Braaivleis fires that Western Cape has been one sweet spot. But not everybody can move to the Cape, or those who are moving now have left it a lot late because they have to first sell up north and they then have to buy down in the Cape, which in certain areas or many areas are priced almost on dollar terms or international terms. So many people come to the Cape and they realize, ooh, this is quite expensive. They will have to downscale fairly dramatically. So as far as property is concerned, if you wanted to build wealth apart from the Western Cape, you needed to take some money and build it elsewhere. I have had personal experience in Mauritius for almost 9 years. I bought my first property in Mauritius 9 years ago when the exchange rate is, ladies and gentlemen, was 6 Rand 40. 6 Rand 40 per dollar. Move money across. I was fortunate enough to have some liquid assets. In fact, I cashed out my pension fund, to be quite truthful, and it was one of the best moves I've ever made. That 4 or 5 million that I took out has now turned into an asset which is worth 15, 20 million, who knows. So the currency plays a factor, but also there has been very nice, steady dollar growth of between 3 and 6%, depending on the island. So as far as wealth creation is concerned, there's nothing better than an asset class that grows in dollar terms when you're living in a currency, in a soft currency country. So a lot of people took our advice. We moved a lot of families across, set them up, bought properties, sometimes 2, in some cases 3 properties. They're extremely healthy. Their personal balance sheets have improved fairly dramatically as opposed to people who've not taken that step. So residential property, not been a good time for South Africa. The second area that I'd like to just very briefly refer to, listed commercial property. These are the listed entities that used to be a fantastic investment until around 2014, 2015. But since then, that has also totally collapsed in many respects as a source of wealth. Adjustments, anything between 30% and even 90% are not uncommon. And commercial property is sitting with a situation that it is stuck in an area, cities or towns, over which they have no control. And things like the collapse of infrastructure, water, electricity, all those things are impacting on the ability of these building owners to generate a profit for their owners. And in many cases, these are old pensioners or pensioners. And they rely on a steady, progressive income from these properties. But what is added to the problem is that these municipalities have used listed commercial property as an easy source of revenue. So if you look at some statistics, that if you take inflation over the last 10 years, and I'm guessing here now, but I would say the inflation on an index basis over 10 years has been about 140, 150% over 10 years, whereas the increase in the rates and taxes from the ANC-controlled municipalities has been in excess of 5, 6, even 700% over the same period of time. To such an extent that I saw a report from one of the, I think it's Growth Point, the Growth Point executive made a comment the other day that certain property owners are earning less from their properties that they pay into the council. So the councils, the rapacious, free-spending councils, are physically destroying the listed property sector as another asset class. So even listed property could not protect you. And if you wanted listed property, which a lot of people do, they had to take their money and buy globally listed property. Then, of course, over the last 10 years, the inflation rate, not only the inflation rate, the currency has been very weak. 10 years ago, I checked today exactly 10 years ago, you could buy a dollar for 7 Rand 80. 7 Rand 80 not so long ago. Today, you're paying 18 Rand 50. So that's a decline of about 60%. And that's why you need to think in dollars as far as I'm concerned. I also did some research when the foreign investment allowance was increased to 10 million Rand per person in February 2015. So it's now almost 8 years ago that the Treasury announced that South Africans can take out 10 million Rand per person per year, plus the 1 million Rand allowance, and create wealth offshore. Since then, they've not increased the allowance. It's still the same. So there's been a tightening of exchange controls. You could buy $800,000 8 years ago. Today, with the same amount of money, you can only buy 550,000 Rand. But the exercise that I did there, I do apologize, I don't have the slides. They will be placed on our website. They're very illuminating. If you take in your 10 million Rand or a million, doesn't matter, the numbers are the same. and you invested either on the JSE or the world index or S&P 500, which is the American stock market, or the NASDAQ, which is the technology-driven, where all the technology companies are listed, you have the following results. The investment in the JSE today, let's call it 1 million rand or 10 million, is 1.7 million rand. That's a return of about 9.8%. The world index, which is an instrument which you can invest in, so you invest proportionately in every part of the world, that will be worth about 2.9%. Big pardon, 2.9 million rand for your 1 million rand. The S&P 500 is 4.4 million rand per 1 million. And of course, NASDAQ was a phenomenal place to be the last 10 years or 8 years. And your 1 million rand would have been turned to almost 7 million rand. Now you can see the difference in wealth creation. So that's why I'm saying South Africans, they might not realize it, but they become very poor relative to other parts of the world, and in dollar terms, and with the currency at 18.50 to the dollar, 23 to the pound, and now 20 to the euro, you absolutely need to invest in dollars or pounds to protect your wealth. People also are thinking about immigrating, whether it's soon or 5 years or 10 years. We at Brenthurst have been advising people for a very long time to start creating dollar-based wealth, and it is paying off. So it's against this background, ladies and gentlemen, that we have set up or purchased together with Samina the Brent Consulta Trust Management Company, which can deal with individuals, companies, and trusts, and foundations to handle wealth, to protect wealth. And what has made it even more important to consider setting up structures like this are two things, and I end up my little portion of the talk there. First of all, the ANC is still very, very seriously considering a wealth tax. Even this week, there were reports that it's built into the pie, it's coming, whether we like it or not, whether it will work or not. Professor Dennis Davis said it won't work, don't try it, but the ANC is hell-bent. There's going to be some kind of a wealth tax, which is going to be levied on either on properties or listed equities or private equities. And one way, it's not perfect, is to create a trust now and start injecting your assets into this trust somewhere offshore, where it's some kind of a layer of protection between yourself and this future tax. It might take a year, it might take 3 years, but I think it's baked into the pie. The ANC, again, this week saying it's coming, whether we like it or not. It's going to cost anything between 100 billion and 500 billion a year over time. So that's the one reason why you need to consider looking at structures at least and seeing how you can protect your personal wealth. The second issue, which makes it also more important to look at if you're a young entrepreneur setting up a business with, and especially if it's got a global reach, is the Employment Equity Act that was signed into law by Cyril Ramaphosa last week, which basically means that any company with more than 50 people on its payroll could be subject to race quotas. And if you cannot qualify in terms of the race quotas, you will be taxed or fined up to 10% of turnover, et cetera, et cetera. Well, this has been slammed by all and condemned by the DA, by everybody else, business leagues, et cetera, said it's unworkable. It's a race-based quotas. How do you force people to fire well-qualified non-black people and replace them with unqualified black people just to satisfy some quota? So this, if I was a young entrepreneur, I will seriously consider the impact this law could have on your business. You might not think you're going to be successful, but you might become very successful. And if you have any kind of a business which may or may not have the potential to become bigger than 50 people, and remember that number can be dropped. The initial talk 2 or 3 years ago when this issue was raised was 20, they're going to look at companies with 20 people. So now that's been pushed up to 50. So it can be reduced or increased at the whim of a government official. I would seriously consider people to set up structures that could handle the offshore companies, to handle the operations via Mauritius, especially if they deal on a global basis. So that, ladies and gentlemen, is my introduction to our following two speakers. Samina Jagoo-Jaffery, who's the CEO of Brent Consulta. We have offices in Grand Bay up in the north, and then in Black River in the south. And then immediately thereafter, Richard Haller, who's the director of Pam Golding, will take over. He will talk more about the specific trends in property. Pam Golding have been a major force on the island for a very, very long time, and we are pleased to be associated with Pam Golding. We have formed a joint marketing operation in terms of marketing of property, trust companies. So it's a great fit, very nice to be part. And I'm going to hand you over to Samina, who will discuss how these trusts works, the pitfalls, the advantages, what these things cost. And immediately thereafter, Richard Haller will take over. From me, it's goodbye until later.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm happy to be with you this afternoon. So today we are going to look at Mauritius as a jurisdiction, as a country, and a place where you can build your business and your life in the future. So let me share my screen with you and we go through the slides. Okay, so Mauritius is a small country, is a small island in the Indian Ocean. We have a population of around, local population of around 1.3 million persons. And we are a multicultural country, a melting pot with most of our ancestors coming from India, Sub-Saharan Africa, and China. And I think the fact that we are a beautiful multicultural country that makes the strength and the difference of living in Mauritius. So Mauritius it was previously a British colony. And then in 1968, it has obtained its independence. And from there, it has built up from strength to strength. The Mauritius, so from, let us say, the 1980s to the early 1990s, Mauritius has been relying mostly on the agricultural sector, sugarcane, then the textile, and then the tourism sector. These were the three main pillars of our economy. Then in around the mid-1990s, the global business, the Mauritius started to portray itself as a financial jurisdiction that was able to provide financial services due to the fact that it had a highly qualified population. That is, the number of chartered accountants, company secretaries, lawyers, and advisors that you have in Mauritius is very high. So this is where the financial jurisdiction aspect of Mauritius started. And from there, Mauritius is now seen as the financial hub for Africa. So if we look at Mauritius today, you will see that it is a highly competitive jurisdiction. It is seen as international financial center, which is open for investment. And as at 2022, the gross the GDP per capita was around $10,243 per head, and Mauritius is now seen as a high income generating country. So the economy of Mauritius, as I have explained to you, is a mix of it is a mix between now the agricultural sector, exports, financial services, and tourism. As of 2022, Mauritius has exported around 314 billion rupees. Mauritius is also part of the COMESA and the SADC movement. We have a very beneficial free trade agreement with China. And despite the COVID epidemic and all the setbacks that COVID-19 has brought to the whole world, the GDP in Mauritius has grown by around 7.8% in 2022. Now, if we look at Mauritius as an international financial center, over the years, we have built up a good number of tax treaties. We have around 44 tax treaties, and most of them are with Africa. We have a greater number of tax treaties between Mauritius and the African countries as compared to Singapore. We are the home to fiscally transparent entities. Now I'm going to stop here. So in 2020, Mauritius was blacklisted by the FATF and the EU because we had certain areas of non-compliance in terms of our AML and CFT rules. As a country and as a jurisdiction, we have worked hard to ensure that the relevant changes are made to our rules, our regulations, so that we meet the relevant requirements in a very short time. And now we can proudly say that Mauritius meets all the FATF and EU requirements 40/40. And this is why we can say that we are home for the establishment of fiscally transparent entities. We have a sophisticated regulatory framework, and that is agile enough to adapt itself to any changes that is happening globally. We are a great facilitator in terms of cross-border investment in Africa and elsewhere. It is also very important to know that taking into consideration the different types of local laws that may arise in certain countries in Africa, Mauritius has put into place an investment protection and investment promotion and protection agreements with several African countries, whereby we have whereby if a company in Mauritius is going to make an investment via its subsidiary or itself is going to make an investment in any African countries where we have an investment and protection and promotion agreement, no matter what law comes into place into that country, the investment of the Mauritian entity and its structure is protected. These are called IPPAs in the common jargon, and it protects the cross-border investment in Africa. So now, when we're through the management company, the request that we get mostly is with respect to the setting up. We have clients who come to see us and say, okay, I want to buy property in Mauritius. I want to start moving my wealth into Mauritius. How do we do it? The structure, it is definitely not a one-size-fits-all, but the most common structure that we advise to our clients to avail of, especially if they are still tax resident as a person in South Africa, is the trust. So the trust is legislated as per the Trust Act in Mauritius. It has a similar type. It is similar to the type of trust that you have in South Africa. The trust will have a settler, which is the person who will create and settle the trust. A trust in Mauritius can have a maximum of 4 trustees, one of which has to be duly licensed by the Financial Services Commission, and this is where the Brent Consulta is going to come in to provide you with the trusteeship services. And then the trust can have the beneficiaries, but the settler cannot be the sole beneficiary of the trust. So the trust also comes with a trust deed, and it comes with a letter of wishes whereby the settler describes as to how he would like to distribute his assets after he passes away. So the trust is a good vehicle for asset protection, to protect your assets in Mauritius, because it is quite confidential structure. This is one thing. The other thing is that it helps in your succession planning for your future generations, because your letter of wishes will clearly say how you would like to distribute the assets. And it also helps you in terms of your wealth management, because the trust comes with a bank account whereby you can transfer money and make investments in Mauritius or abroad, and have these investments managed via your trust. So these are the main aspects of the trust. Generally, the trust does not need to be registered with any authorities in Mauritius, but if you want to have a date certain for the trust, then it has to be, we can register it with the Registrar General to obtain the date certain. But this is in very rare cases that certain clients will ask us that it has to be registered. But it has its legal weight through its trust deed, and you're completely protected on that. The second aspect that we need to look at about the trust is that in Mauritius as a jurisdiction, there is no donations tax, no inheritance tax, and no capital gains tax. So now we are going to look at the taxability of a trust. For example, tomorrow you buy a property in Mauritius via the trust for $1 million. And after a few years, you decide to dispose of the property for $1.5 million. That $500,000 that you have made as a profit on that property is not taxed in Mauritius because there is no capital gains tax. So it goes back into your trust, no problem, you have no tax to pay. Now, apart from the disposal of assets where there is no tax, the trust, if the beneficiaries and the majority of the trustees are residing in Mauritius, then the trust is taxed at 15% on any income that it generates and any income that has not been taxed abroad for a minimum of 15%. If the income that is coming to the trust has already been taxed abroad for a minimum of 15%, then there is no tax that is applied. If the trustees and the beneficiaries are not residing in Mauritius, then the trust is taxed at 0%. So these are the reasons why many of our clients are looking at setting up trusts in Mauritius. Now let us look a little bit at the financial services sector of Mauritius being a hub for Africa, and the services that we can also provide you at the level of Brent Consulta Management Services, which is a duly licensed management company by the Financial Services Commission. So as a management company, we can set up global business companies for you, which is a company where most of the income is generated outside of Mauritius. Most of these these type of companies are generally held by trusts. So we have the trust on top, and then the trust hold the shares in the global business company. And the advantage of such a structure is that it has a fiscal efficiency in terms that with the different double taxation agreements that Mauritius has with the different countries, it so happens that these global business companies that we set up can be taxed at a minimum at 3% on their profit after claiming all the tax credits from abroad. The advantage is that it is for international operations, and you can also house your residential property in Mauritius under that global business company. This is a structure that is also very commonly used by fintech companies and that are into innovation as well. So we, as a country, we are looking at encouraging foreign direct investment into our country through tax optimized structures. In Mauritius, we also have a very good labor force in terms of software engineers. And we also have some innovative licenses for the IT sector. Setting up your IT business in Mauritius is definitely an advantage, because the aim and the strategy for the country is to be the IT hub for Africa. So, as you can see, we have a lot of families that are relocating to Mauritius. When you decide to relocate to Mauritius, there are a few things that you need to consider. Is whether you're coming in as an investor, are you going to buy a property and get the residence permit under the acquisition of property scheme? And we are also looking at the different whether we can move under the acquisition of property scheme, or whether you're going to come as a self-employed, which is the equivalent of the sole proprietorship in South Africa, or simply whether you're going to retire in Mauritius. So these are the aspects that we look at when you decide to relocate, and we have a face-to-face or an online meeting with you to look at these aspects, guide you on the most valuable route for you for your permit. The other aspect that we look at is, for your business, what is the type of structure to set up? And then the last thing that we also look at is with respect to where will you live, where will your children go to school, and this is where Richard will come from Pam Golding will come and assist you on the real estate side. So basically, in Mauritius, there are a few routes that you can adopt to come and relocate to Mauritius. Firstly, we have the permit via the acquisition of property route. Then we have the occupation permit route, which is split into three categories: the investor permit, the professional permit, and the self-employed permit. And then finally, you have the other residency route, which is the retired permit. We can provide you with all these information as and when required, but the best thing is to have a one-on-one consultation so that we can guide you properly. So I now leave the floor to my colleague, Richard, who is going to cover the aspect of real estate in Mauritius. Thank you.
Good, thanks, Samina. Thank you, Magnus, for the introduction. Just share my screen. Okay, so I'm going to take you through the residency by investment program, which is really underpinned by real estate. I'm going to look at how the program works, take you through some of that detail, some of the background of real estate, and then also look at some property options available should you be interested in purchasing something in Mauritius and which areas to focus on. So for some of you who don't know Mauritius, I'll just give you a quick overview. So that's the island of Mauritius. The two main areas that we focus on are Grand Bay up in the north over here, and then Tamarin down on the west coast. So those are the two main areas where we've seen a growth in infrastructure. We've seen the advent of shopping centers. We've seen the arrivals of the international schools over the last few years, as well as recreational aspects such as gyms and coffee shops, and really where the bulk of expats choose to reside because of those reasons, but also because of the ability to integrate into a bigger community. I normally do show a live video on live presentations, but it doesn't work so well over Zoom. So that's just an aerial shot of Grand Bay from one of our videos. It just shows the sort of natural beauty and the coastline of the island. That's Grand Bay, which has a great selection of water sports and white beaches. So just touching on the Mauritius Residency by Investment Program. So it's been running successfully for more than 20 years now. It's really one of the simplest residency and real estate programs around. $375,000 property purchase within an approved development for foreigners gets yourself, your spouse, and your children under the age of 24 permanent residency status. There's no visitation requirements, no language tests. Ultimately, you don't have to set one foot in Mauritius. You can own the property and keep your permanent residency without having to do anything else. So why are our clients buying? So ultimately, it's a combination of factors. So we've got the offshore element and the offshore investment angle, which is really a rand hedge. The Mauritian real estate market trades in US dollar or in euro. And ultimately, that is interesting for clients wanting to diversify their portfolio. Estate planning, as Samina touched on, is really becoming an interesting option for clients who's looking for the longer term plan. And then there's a combination of clients looking to retire, spend some of their time in Mauritius, some in South Africa and some abroad with their kids. And then ultimately, some of those choose to relocate, and it gives you an alternative residency option. And then lifestyle, as I mentioned, and the safety and security element also important. So what we've seen over the last few years is really continued improvements to the residency program. So it's dropped from $500,000 buy-in to $375,000. A big one is now you're also eligible to work with your permanent residency status through property. So you no longer need to apply for a separate occupation permit. You are entitled to bring your parents with you. So therefore, the program covers 3 generations, ultimately. So if I have permanent residency status, I can now bring my parents-in-law with me, as well as my kids are covered for residency up to the age of 24. Then one that came about 18 months ago is the joint ownership and multiple permanent residencies if you buy one property. So if you buy one property at, let's say, $1.125 million, there are ultimately 3 residency components to that property. And therefore, should I want to buy with myself, my brother and my sister, we can all get permanent residency, as well as the parents-in-law, and all our kids are covered for residency. So that's quite interesting. What we've also seen is the introduction of the premium visa which is ultimately, it allows people to reside in Mauritius for 12 months renewable, provided they're working offshore and remotely. And this has fueled the rental market on the island. At the moment, we're quite short on stock. We've seen an increase in pricing, and obviously that bodes well from a real estate perspective, as well as a buy-to-let investor. But ultimately, all these changes are positive to the ecosystem. So we're very happy about all of those changes. So just looking at the purchasing property in Mauritius, and like all countries and all areas, important to ensure a strong location. One of the fundamentals of real estate, and important as well is the rentability of the property and that particular location, as well as consideration for your ability to liquidate your investment down the line should you want to exit and resell. Also, reputable brokers, real estate brokers, and experienced developers. Always critical that you deal with the right professional staff on the island, because they can guide you as per the law and ensure that your transactions run all above board. Just important to note, when buying property from an entry and exit cost point of view, transfer fees are at 5% flat rate plus a notary fee of about 1.15%. So plan for about 6.2% of fees on top of the purchase price. There's no buyer's commission when purchasing off plan. But when buying a resale unit, important to note in Mauritius, both the buyer and the seller pay commission. When you exit your property, there's a 5% selling tax. So in total, you're looking at an entry and exit cost of between 11 and 13%, depending on whether you buy off plan or you buy a resale unit. So just touching quickly on our clients, we've got a mixture of retired clients looking to spend some time on the island, families relocating, swallows who spend part of the time of their time in Mauritius. And then we've got the pure investor that's looking to buy real estate and ultimately have a hands-off investment in US dollars, also secure permanent residency, and they don't really want to worry about managing the property. So touching on the sales price per square meter, or we're looking at apartments now in Mauritius. Ultimately, we can compare it to the South African Cape Town Atlantic seaboard, quite similar from a price per square meter point of view. So if you look at a smaller apartment block with lesser facilities, or probably no facilities other than a swimming pool, you're in the region of 40 to 50,000 Rand per square meter. If you get slightly more primarily located, the developments in Grand Bay and Tamarin, you're at about 50 to 60,000 Rand a square meter. Those often have a few more facilities like a gym and a little cafe or clubhouse on site. And then you've got the larger estates with more facilities, and you're there in the region of about 60 to 85,000 Rand per square meter. We're looking at capital growth on average over the years of about 6% per annum, and then rental yields at between 4 and 6%, depending on how you sweat your asset. A big question is, can I finance my purchase in Mauritius? And this is something that you don't see in other residency and real estate programs. So you can mortgage a property up to 70% of the loan, or loan to value of the property. So up to the age of 65 years. So if you're 55 years old, you will get a 10-year bond up to the age of 65. But it's good to know that if the buy-in is $375,000, you can mortgage up to 70% of that and still get permanent residency status and offshore investment. So something that Samina and her team can help you with is how you can hold the property. You can hold it in your own name, just in your private capacity. The Mauritian trust structure is an interesting one, and Samina touched on that earlier. Then you can hold it in a company or a partnership, which is called a society in Mauritius. Okay, just looking more detail into Grand Bay, which is the largest and most popular coastal town in Mauritius. We've seen tremendous growth over the last 5 years in that area. I touched on it earlier: shopping centers, restaurants, international brands, both South African as well as European brands, groceries, grocers, as well as the medical care environment. So this is just some pictures. You've got Perivere Beach on the on the right-hand side, and then Monchwazi Beach on the bottom right-hand side. So really a pretty part of the island. Here you can see the two shopping centers in the north. One of them, the top one, is La Croisette. That is ultimately the larger shopping center in Grand Bay and covers a lot of brands, including South African, such as Nando's. Ocean Basket is there. You've got Woolies Clothing, and I think Truworths is up there. And then you have international brands like Next and Esprit. So you can basically find everything you need up in Grand Bay. And then in the bottom pictures, you've got Montreal Shopping Centre, which is more of a boutique centre, which has Italian delicatessens, a great wine store, organic fruit and veg grocer, which has been very well received. And we're seeing that sort of come up with more boutique options. Interestingly, we're also seeing the growth of sports and gym centres around. This one in particular, this is 6,000 square meters under roof in Grand Bay, called RM Gym. You've got internal paddle courts and external paddle courts. You've got squash, you've got tennis, you've got the gym, 7-a-side soccer also inside. So more than enough to keep you busy from a fitness point of view. And then we're also seeing a lot of the coffee culture, which is became quite prevalent in Mauritius over the last 3 or 4 years. Something interesting for families, should you want to relocate with your kids, you've got ultimately a choice of 3 international schools, Northfields International School, and now Northfields IPS, which is the junior school, Lighthouse International School, and Green Coast, and they all follow the curriculums that allow your children to ultimately study overseas. We see a lot of the Mauritian matric graduates studying in the UK, France, Australia, and Canada, and that's sort of the 4 main areas that they go to. So just touching on real estate in the Grand Bay area, one of the most successful developments that we've been selling over the last few years, I think we launched in 2015, is Montreal Golf and Beach Estate. This is primarily situated with the town of Grand Bay on the one side and then Montreal Beach on the other side. Very similar, I guess, to the larger estates that we know, like in South Africa, where you've got a lot more common land, you've got a lot of facilities wrapped around it. In this case, you've got the 18-hole Peter Matkiewicz designed golf course, which is actually standalone from the real estate, so you're not labored with the levies. You've got the clubhouse, tennis court, paddle courts, gym, equestrian facilities on site, and then on its doorstep is the shopping malls. You also have a nature reserve of 52 acres. So there you see that's the 15th hole with the flamboyant trees in bloom. So really beautifully designed course. And here's an aerial shot of the golf course with some of the real estate in the background. If you can see my cursor here, you've got the Island Signature Villas, which are currently reselling at about $4.5 million each. And in the background, just behind the logo here, you've got the completion of phase 1 and 2. So at the moment, we've got phase 3 under construction, all sold out. We've got phase 4, which is under construction and almost sold out. And we've launched phase 5 about 3 months ago. The picture you see here is the newly designed lagoon and eco pool area, which will subdivide the phases of phase 3, 4, and 5 with the villas. And that's another sort of set of facilities that the homeowners can use. So really, Montchoisy, from an investment point of view, from a living point of view, very interesting option. We manage the rental program there as Pam Golding, as a joint venture with the developer. And we currently have no stock available. So we're desperately waiting for phase 3 to come on stream. And obviously, that's a good problem to have from an investor perspective. Then something that's a bit more hands-off is called The Essence. This is situated in Troa Beach, very popular part of Grand Bay, and very interesting option if you're looking for a hands-off buy-to-let investment that'll be managed by the hotel itself. So location-wise, you've got the Casarina, the Essence Apartments, linked to the Casarina Hotel, and just across the road, you've got the Cardinal Hotel, owned by the same group, which you get access to as your beach club, and ultimately, pricing starts at $249,000 for a 1-bed, $375,000 for a 2-bed, and $600,000 for a 3-bed. Put it back into the rental pool, and return of investment up to 7%, depending on the occupancy of the hotel. But historically, it's been trading for many, many years at a very high occupancy. Another interesting one in Grand Bay. So to give you some orientation, here's the beach of Montchoisy. I just spoke about Montchoisy Golf and Beach Estate over here. Casarina is situated in Troa Beach, and La Pointe is situated just behind the well-known Pointe Cananier Club Med hotels. Many of us have been there for holidays. And the point is a larger style developments with quite a lot of facilities wrapped around it and within 30 seconds of walking distance to the beach. So strong developer, we've worked with him before. Pricing starting at $425,000, the clubhouse German restaurant on site. And I think worth a look from an investment point of view. Phase 1, almost complete construction and sold out. Phase 2, there's about 4 or 5 units remaining, and construction will start in June. And then we plan to launch the final phase, which is phase 3, in about 3 months' time. Then heading down to the west coast, a beautiful part of the island. Magnus resides on that side, and with a beautiful mountain backdrop. Great for mountain biking, fishing, and a very pretty part of the island. We've also seen the growth of infrastructure on the west coast. As we stand now, probably a couple of years ago, they were a bit behind from an infrastructure point of view, but it's rapidly catching up. If you see in this picture, this is the latest Super U shopping center in the Cap Tamarin Smart City. And also we're seeing the paddle courts and the gym and fitness arriving on the west coast. And also from a nature point of view, just a great place to go and walk in the mountains and do scuba diving. So looking at the international schools and universities, also a selection. You've got the Telfair International School, Paul and Virginia, and then the West Coast International School, as well as from a university perspective, Middlesex University, which is a campus of the Middlesex University in the UK. From a real estate perspective on the West Coast, La Pirogue Residences, many of you might remember La Pirogue, been around for about 35 years, managed by Sun Resorts, on the beautiful white stretch of sandy beaches of Flick and Flack. And this is very similar to the essence in terms of it can be a hands-off investment that you throw back into the rental program and garner a return of up to 6.75%. You can also get some usage out of it. So you get 60 days usage per year, should you want to use it. Otherwise, you can throw that back into the rental pool to increase your yield. But really, one of the iconic hotels on the island, right next to Sugar Beach, which is part of the same group, and an interesting option from an investment perspective. Next one, it's a couple of minutes from Tamarin, which is a new suburb facing Le Morne. So this is called Infinity by the Sea by the Two Futures developers. We've also worked with them for many, many years. And for me, this is an interesting option in terms of its location. Really got a beautiful aspect facing Le Morne. Pricing starting at just under $300,000 for a 1.5 bedroom unit, closer to $425,000 for a 2-bedroom unit, and the penthouses with uninterrupted sea views will be magnificent, facing over towards the Le Morne mountain. So the long-term capital growth potential of something like Infinity for me is interesting because it's a brand new suburb, all new infrastructure in terms of roads. We've got the new Club Med golf course Beachcomber golf course starting construction soon, as well as hotels. And we have some boutique hotels arriving right next to Infinity. So that whole area is basically a new suburb, and I think that bodes very well for capital growth. Also, I think what's interesting with that is only in the last 2 or 3 years, as foreigners, have we seen some products on the waterfront. So that has opened up a bit by the government for foreigners to invest in. And so I think that's an interesting option. Then I touched on earlier the multiple residencies by buying one property. Heritage Villas Valriche is about 25 minutes from the Infinity development I showed you now and from Tamarin, and a well-established estate. Beautiful golf course, 5-star, 2 5-star hotels, beach club, and you get access to all of those. And if you would like to buy one villa, they start at about $1.3 million, and you want to buy that with your friends or your family, or get permanent residency and get some usage out of it, or throw it back into a rental program, then for me, this is an interesting option from something a little bit different and looking at the top end of the market. Okay, so that covers the real estate side, and I think over to you, Magnus, for the Q&A.
Thank you very much, Richard. That's some nice photographs, some very nice new developments there, which I wasn't even aware of. But just before we take some questions, we had a couple of questions on the Q&A already. One is on what percentage interest rate is going on the island. So Richard, you can take a bite at that one. The other one is, Samina, I think very important, a question from one of the South Africans who set up on the island, their business on the island, Adam Dembowski from Work 17, which is a very nice concept. He's asking, what are the benefits of owning a property in a trust if you live on the island? And I think let's start with those two questions. Richard, what are the interest rates on the island currently?
Okay, so at the moment, they're sitting at about 6% interest rate in Mauritian rupees. So quite a bit lower than obviously we're seeing in South Africa at the moment. I think given the latest US rate increase, we might see an increase coming through there, probably to about 6.5%. But ultimately, that's the rate from a Mauritian rupee point of view. You can also mortgage in US dollars and euros. Those rates are slightly different. At the moment, for me, they weren't that attractive. They were sitting at about not far away from the rupee rate. So yeah, that's where it's at the moment.
I think one can add to that, Richard, that some of the banks offer multiple currencies, and you can change the currency of your bond depending on what happens in currency markets and or your view on future currency development. So for the more sophisticated investor, you can start with a dollar loan, but if the dollar starts sliding against the pound or the euro, you can swap it or vice versa, depending on how smart or how not smart you are. So that's very interesting. That's not available in South Africa. And it's nice to know you can reprice your mortgage as time goes by. I think, Richard, there are a couple of points that needs to be stressed to the people listening. There's almost 400 people still attending to this, and we're going to sending this out. My experience has been, and you pick it up from guys on the island, there are some very, very good operators and very good products and honorable developers, but there are also a couple of fly-by-nights, and it's very, very important that you don't only look at just price, because, price is normally the competitive edge that these guys use to do their transactions, but you then stuck with all the defects of the property and bad design and unfulfilled promises. There have been a couple of instances, and if you're on the island, you know who they are. Stay away from them. Deal with the registered and the approved. And that's why I deal with somebody like Pam Golding or Brenthurst. We have often said to people who wanted to buy one of these smaller single type operators, stay away, and we will give them their reasons. So that's very, very important, because that's one of the functions of, if you're dealing with reputable people, they will do that homework for you. And you come in as a foreigner, there are a lot of laws that are not applicable in South Africa. And you can, if you do make a mistake, you can be stuck with that mistake for a very, very long time. So very important. Absolutely. Before I take another question, I'll come to you in a second about that trust. I had a couple of questions about medical services or quality of doctors. And I can just speak from my perspective, what I've seen over the last 5 to 8 years, the proliferation of fantastic new hospitals, clinics, lots of doctors. I've interacted with some of these doctors, equally as good as South African doctors. I've been told that the aftercare in Mauritius is better than in South Africa. And so, that's the first thing people ask me. The second thing they ask is about banks and stuff like that. And Richard, in my little town, our village, Black River at the Rousseau Corel shopping center, there are almost more South African financial institutions in that shopping center. And I'm referring to Pam Golding and Rawson's and Seif and Remax. But you've got Sanlam there, you've got ABSA there, Panarottis. It is unbelievable, the South African presence on the island. So you're never alone. There's fantastic networking groups that people have set up, whether you've got children or other activities. And so it's incredibly easy to slot in because people speak English, all of them. drive on the left-hand side of the road, and the final legal courts are British courts. So you're not unfamiliar with most parts of the Mauritian legal system. But the one thing that's very important, Samina, is just to explain why, if you are buying property, we are recommended that you consider putting it into a trust in the case of death. So if you just can explain that for us.
Yes. So if you are a tax resident in South Africa and you are planning to buy a property in Mauritius, it is advisable that you set up a trust in Mauritius where you are the settler and you house your property under that trust. The principle of a trust is that basically you are divorcing yourself from having the property under your name directly, but instead it moves to the trust. So then it doesn't mean that the benefits or all the benefits of the property, if you're renting it out, will go directly to the trust. And in case of it is also kept safe for your future generation. Therefore, it is a good estate planning tool.
All right, so that's a good answer. There's a question. I'm going to skip them. All right, these are some questions we've already answered. How much is property in Mauritius? Andrew Ford asked, sorry, I've identified him, haven't got his permission, so I've broken the law. How much is property in Mauritius in square meter in USD terms? Richard, what would you say current new developments coming onto the market? Anything between $2,000 to $4,000 per square meter? Would you say that's a good guess?
Yeah, I would say about $2,500 to $4,500 now. There has been a increase over the last 12 to 18 months in terms of construction costs, and that has definitely been felt quite significantly on the new price lists coming out, and that will then trickle down to the resale market, as we're starting to see now. But yeah, you're in about that ballpark.
There's a question, and the answer is going to be very interesting. Someone asks, what is the typical property rates, local municipal rates be in Mauritius? Well, the answer is zero, nothing, not a cent, nada, nix. You want me to carry on? I mean, that's what people don't understand how it's possible. In South Africa, we are dealing with this monster called rates and taxes, which increases at 15% per annum, and it's being milked by all the councils. Mauritius doesn't have municipal taxes.
I think the cost of ownership of property, is quite low when you look at your running costs. It's electricity, which is cheaper than we currently have in South Africa, or just marginally. Water doesn't cost anything in Mauritius. I mean, I don't think I get a bill. Every 3 or 4 months, I might get a small bill, and that's it, really. So.
There's another issue, and we're just about to wrap up. But I drive the same 2 cars, one in South Africa, one in Mauritius, identical model, year, even color is almost the same, but not exactly. My insurance on the Mauritian car is a quarter of the car in South Africa. So I pay a quarter of premiums because there are no hijackings and or car thefts on the island. Nothing. We as South Africans have become so used to living in this crime-infested environment, but there's no crime on the island. I have not, it's just not there. So your insurance premiums are a quarter. There's no land tax. And if you're looking from an income tax perspective, the maximum personal and or company taxes is 15%. So if you start doing all these numbers as a young person, an entrepreneur, maybe someone set up a family, the long-term benefits of setting it up in Mauritius is fairly tremendous. So we'll take one more question. Samina, I have a question about setting up of a trust. What are the fees that normally are the going fees?
Yes. Yes. So before I answer this question, I would like to highlight that in terms of our fee structure, we are extremely competitive on the island. And so, for instance, if I give you an example for the setting up of a trust, it costs around $500 for the trust setup. And the annual fees is around $2,500 annually. And this is the same amount that is invoiced to you annually.
Thank you for that. We've got some more questions that have come in which were quite interesting. Richard, we have a question. Someone is asking, does the fact that the Infinity development is a leasehold property, is that a factor? And if so, how much if you want to resell it one day, which is quite important because it's not freehold, it's leasehold. What are your comments on that?
Yeah, I think the leasehold land ownership for foreigners a couple of years ago was not an option. The reality is that the majority of beachfront land and waterfront land in Mauritius is leasehold property. It has been like that for over 100 years. So what the government and the Economic Development Board have done, they've opened up the ability to do developments of foreigners on those pieces of land. So from an ownership perspective, you still have full title of your property. So in Mauritius, if you buy an apartment, it's not termed sectional title, it's full title, so you own the property. But what does come with the leasehold land is a renewal after 60 years, which the homeowners will have to go through. It's nothing particularly unusual in Mauritius. The families who live on the beach for the last, many, many years, they go through the process, and it's quite a standard process. But there will be a slight impact on the monthly levy for the homeowners based on that leasehold land.
Another property-related question, Richard, and it refers to the essence, would the return that you quoted of approximately 7% be net or gross? In other words, before or after, maintenance costs and syndic levies, etc. I would suggest that would be a gross number. I mean, if I can get a net 7%, I'll put all my money into it, but I doubt if you can achieve that.
So at this stage, it is, I think the 7% would apply if you throw back any usage into the rental program. So that's why, so sort of up to 7%. So you've got to put it back for the full 12 months. My understanding, Magnus, is that it is a net return. So you don't have the levies on a monthly basis. You don't have the maintenance. The hotel runs all of that for you. But I would have to double check that.
If it was true, that'll be a fantastic investment. We've got two more questions. Someone is making a comment more than anything else. Let's talk about the dollar tanking, globally and being overtaken by other currencies. I mean, I think it's a question that I would answer. Ever since I came into the financial world many, many decades ago, this topic pops up every now and then, that this is the end of the dollar and the Japanese yen will take over, or the euro will take over, or the Chinese renminbi. My answer to that, it's rubbish. It's not going to happen. There's a lot of political politics trying to talk the dollar down. It's not going to happen. If you do the numbers, 70% of all world trade is priced in dollars. It's not going to change overnight, not in our lifetime. One last question about trust. This is a question on trust in Mauritius. Can you have, in terms of your trustees, can you have some South African trustees on the trust plus the Mauritian trustees, or must they all be Mauritian trustees? And I think we'll end up with that question.
Yes, totally. So the Trust Act tells you that any trust that is being set up in Mauritius, you can have a maximum of 4 trustees, with at least one of them being duly licensed by the Financial Services Commission in Mauritius. So this is where the Brent Consulta comes in by offering this service. Then the remaining 3 trustees can be from anywhere in the world, can be non-Mauritians as well. But you need to be careful, because if, for example, you are a tax resident in South Africa and you are acting as trustee on a trust in Mauritius, this will have to be disclosed in your personal income tax return in South Africa. And this is not really what, so we have to be very careful about that.
I think that's very valid comments, Samina, and that's why we have people like you running Brent Consulta. And by the way, I've just been told that the Brent Consulta website has just been launched. It's open and running. Brent Consulta, one word, .mu. If you want to go and find out details of Samina and all the other team, extremely busy. Brent Consulta with a C, brentconsulta.mu. Richard, thank you very much. If people want to get in touch with, if you've got any more questions on this, there's a lot of questions suddenly pouring in, but we are running out of time. I think it was a time years thing. I just want to end up by saying, I don't know what's going to happen in the future. I do know that unless the ANC changes its economic and political policies, this trend, downward trend, disappearing over the abyss is going to continue. And I think the ANC is busy destroying our economy. And a lot of people are now realizing that they need to have some kind of a plan B, even if they don't have to even exercise it, but it makes a lot of sense. If I was a young business person with a couple of young kids, I would surely be at least investigating the options of setting up structures, investments, and or my business in Mauritius in case the worst comes into South Africa. The one slide that I have, and I do apologize about my slides again, and I used the quote of Peter Bruce, who's a very famous journalist in South Africa, was the editor of the Financial Mail, editor of the Business Day, Business Live. He wrote an article about 2 weeks ago, and remember 5 years ago, he was a very big advocate of Cyril Ramaphosa and Ramaphoria. He simply wrote an article last week saying, things will get worse before they get even worse. And then they'll really get bad. And he basically saying, you know, South Africa is busy imploding. And that was followed by lots of other commentators who were saying the same, that the ANC plus the EFF, which might join them in coalition, could end up destroying what is left of our economy. Thank you for listening. Thank you for attending, Samina. You're welcome to email invest@brenthurstwealth.co.za. I'll repeat that, invest@brenthurstwealth.co.za. Property-related matters, we'll hand them over to Richard. Trust matters, we'll hand them over to Samina, and the investment stuff we will handle. But I'd like to thank you very much for your time and patience, and to our speakers this afternoon. Thank you very much and good day.
Yep.